I think it's now 10 o'clock. We can start. So good morning all. To introduce myself, my name is Zainab Meborno. I work at the University of Leicester and co-chairing the panel with Professor Gordon Crawford and Professor James Kiwa. It is our pleasure to have the second session of our panel. Yesterday we had very interesting discussions, and today also we hope to get something very rich that will have a lot to take away. I would before I open the floor, I will ask each presenter to introduce herself, his or herself. So I will start with Bomai, just your name, university, and then we will pass on to the next person. Can I kindly ask if we could stop sharing the screen for now until we're done with the introduction, please?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bomai Whitney from Papua New Guinea, and I'm a PhD research student with Queensland University of Technology.
Next.
Thank you.
Isabel? Yeah.
A brief presentation of mine. My name is Isabel. I'm a PhD student in social science at the University of Salamanca in Spain. But I'm from Colombia.
Thank you. Next. Cass?
Is that me? I'm Cass Pere, Research Associate from the Open University. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Michael? I don't see Michael with us. I don't know if any of his
co-presenters I think Michael does. Okay, he's here. He's here.
Okay. Michael, can you quickly introduce yourself and your team?
He's not connected yet. He's just connecting.
So we'll have Gordon and James.
So, okay, my name is Gordon Crawford, and I'm Professor of Global Development at the Centre for Trust, Peace and Social Relations at Coventry University, a former colleague of Zainab, and also a collaborator with James.
I'm Kevin James Kewi. I'm with the African Leadership Center Nairobi, and I am a collaborator of Gordon, and also collaborating with Zainab for the organization of this panel. Thank you.
Michael?
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Ogu. I am a professor at Babcock University in Nigeria. My research area is security studies, international relations, particularly arms, conflict, and proliferation. And I'll be presenting a paper with some of my other colleagues from Babcock. Thank you.
Thank you. Are they here, your colleagues?
Yes, Usibi is here.
Okay. So quickly.
But one of them is not here. But Usibi, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Usibi Irmia. I am a master's degree student at Babcock University, and my research areas are human security and security studies as well. And I'll be presenting a paper alongside Dr. Mike and another of our colleagues.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the introductions. Without taking much time, I'll hand over to Bomai for his presentation. So you can start. Once it's 10 minutes, I'll wave my hand at you just so that you know it's time to round up.
Okay, once again, good night. Good morning, everyone. This presentation is part of my PhD project at Queensland University of Technology, where I am being supported by Associate Professor Verena Thomas, Dr. Jackie Cowley, Christina Spurgeon, Australian Award Scholarship, University of Goroka, and Mayuri tribal people. Now, this research is located in Papua New Guinea, and Papua New Guinea is located towards the north of Australia as 20 administrative provinces and many tribes. So my research is done in the Simbu province of Papua New Guinea among the Yuri people. And the yellow dots on my right shows the number of tribal villages that I visited to collect my data. Now, this photo shows one of the tracks that I traveled during my fieldwork. Now, I use about three research methods for my fieldwork. The first one is interview. The second one is kapori in the Yuri language, or storytelling, and photo voice. And in all of these research methods, I wanted to find out why the Yuri people were motivated to build peace, and what each of them contribute to peace building and their collective efforts in building peace, and the continuous effort to sustain peace building, particularly to address different forms of violence, including sorcery accusation related violence. Now, I conducted interviews among 26 participants who represented the 13 clans of the Yuri tribe. And the Kapori was conducted among 14 participants who represented about 13 clans of the Yuri tribe. And Kapori, or storytelling, is very popular among the Yuri people, where they get around the fires at night or in the morning, or whenever they want to tell stories, they come together and tell stories. So I use that as a indigenous research approach to understand how they address violence. And photo voice is a method where I shoot cameras to participants who go out to take photos based on their stories and how they want to represent their stories using photos, with a view to raise awareness and develop educational materials that they will use as a resource to address sorcery accusation related violence. Now, sorcery accusation related violence is a contemporary development issue in Papua New Guinea. As in the context of this study, sorcery is defined as some people within a particular community who believe that other people within the same community or other communities possess supernatural powers that are used to harm the entire community or cause illness to individuals, or even cause death in the family. And with this belief, people resort to violence whenever something bad happens in the community or someone is ill or even die in the community. And the types of violence they use, a verbal abuse, or they can use force to make sure a family is banished from their tribal communities. And sometimes they kill and destroy homes, and families of the victims are displaced. And it is a cross-cutting issue that affects many people and communities in Papua New Guinea. Now, the issue that the Yuri community and the province have to deal with is how to protect and support the victims of sorcery-related violence, the spouses and the children who are displaced. So there must be supportive intervention, social programs in the community to make sure that the victims are reintegrated into the community and move on with life, as well as supportive services for perpetrators to change attitudes and become non-violent citizens in the community. Now, literature also on sorcery accusation-related violence suggests that there are more women who are victims of sorcery accusation-related violence compared to men and children, and there are more men who are perpetrators of this particular form of violence compared to women and children, and SARP affects everyone in a particular community. And there are also positive movements or stories coming out from people, particularly at the grassroots level, to address different forms of violence, including SARP. And one of these organizations is Coop Women for Peace. This is a woman-led movement where a number of women who are victims of tribal fights and other human rights abuses stepped up to address tribal fights and other forms of violence, including sorcery accusation-related violence in the province where this study was conducted and in other parts of Papua New Guinea as well. The other success story is from the Cafe Urban Settlers Women's Association, where this organization was started by a victim of domestic gender-based violence, and she built networks with like-minded women and other community members to raise awareness and advocate against different forms of violence. Another movement is called the Highlands Human Rights Defenders, where it is a network of churches and grassroots movements to raise awareness and advocate against different forms of violence. And I think one of the things that they achieved for a country was the national outcry or national mourning movement in 2013, when a woman was accused of sorcery and killed in a public place. And these collective movements, including churches, civil society organizations, and individuals, both from within Papua New Guinea and other international communities, came together to protest strongly against that particular violence and demanded the government to revisit its legislations and introduce appropriate legislations and measures to deal with sorcery accusation-related violence. and this is an ongoing conversation. And in 2013, around the same year, the Yuri tribe, which is made up of 13 clans, came together to start a peace building and reconciliation process to address decades of tribal and intra-clan fights. And since 2013, there has not been any tribal fights. Now, I am investigating sorcery accusation related violence using the Yuri tribe in order to find out how peace building and reconciliation at the community level also contributes to understand and rethink ways of addressing sorcery accusation related violence. And the focus here is on is among the Yuri women, and Yuri women play multiple roles in the community. They are mothers, they are sisters, they are aunts, and they look for ways to deal with sorcery accusation related violence. And this photograph shows that women strongly oppose perpetrators using weapons to commit different forms of violence. And then the women also use their community social networks, the church networks, and also use their homes to save and protect women or men or children who are victims of violence and help them to reintegrate back into the communities. And the Yuri women strongly feel that they have the power to change situations at the community level by harnessing and using their social relationships and networks within the family, extended family, and churches, village courts, and the spaces that are available for them to use to extend the conversation against sorcery accusation related violence. And I'd like to end with this quote from one of my participants. I am a Christian who is scared of God. I am a public figure and people screen me and confirmed I am a Christian. Whatever I do, I have power. They will respect me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So next, we will have Isabel for her presentation. If you can please stop sharing so that Isabel can share her.
Okay, hello everyone. Now, are you seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So today I'm gonna talk about women's work in Peacebuilding Colombia, voice, participation, and social inclusion for a bottom-up perspective. First of all, I just want to confess that this is my first time presenting in English, so I apologize in advance if I make any mistakes. Well, women's participation in peace processes can be placed at different moments. At the negotiation table, at the signing an agreement, and the implementation of the accord. But civil society also plays a role that doesn't appear on the test. This article is part of my thesis that is called Capability Building and Institutional Architecture for Socioeconomic Inclusion of FARC ex-combatants. Well, a kind of context. Women are not often visible in the peace processes. They are excluded from the formulation, implementation, and evaluation of DDR. They are rarely leaders during reconstruction. Based on a study conducted by the United States Council of Foreign Relations, they found that all major peace processes between 1980 and 2017, just 8% of mediators, 8% of negotiators, 5% of witnesses and signatories to peace agreements were women. And accordingly with True and Rivero Morales, based on the analysis of almost 100 peace agreements across the world, they find that the peace agreements are significantly more likely to have gender provisions when women participate in elite peace process. So I'm gonna split my presentation in different moments. Before peace agreement, the women's movement in Colombia is strong and vocal, and women also lead many Colombian NGOs, but there is not a unified women's movement, and several issues separate women's organizations rather than unite them. In terms of the peace process, there are differing views about topics, but because they articulate some efforts, women's civil society mobilization during the peace process took place in 2 national summits. The first one in the late 2013 called "To Be Pacting, Not Pacted" in the Havana negotiation process. Almost 500 women all over Colombia gathered to promote the participation of women in peace building. And these women agreed on 4 points: to support the peace process, to insist in the participation of women in all the stages of the process, to advocate strongly for the inclusion of concerns relating to how the conflict has affected women, and an inclusive language should be used in the peace agreement. And the second one, it was in 2016 and was called "We Participate and Decide in Peace Building." Some of these collectives that was involved is Colombian Women for Peace, Women for Peace Initiative, and in Spanish, Ruta Pacífica, Corporación Colombiana de Teatro, Red Nacional de Artistas, Asociación de Mujeres por la Paz, and the FARC EP also created a group Mujeres Farianas. That participation includes women's freedom to engage in public debate and in discussion, and the relation in civil society organization and representation on the rights of journalists. Once their representation during the negotiation was secure, women's civil society organizations had a mechanism to substantively influence the peace agreement. Now, during the negotiation table, women, peace, and security framework was part of the expectation of large part of Colombian society. And this continued pressure was crucial in advocating the importance of the gender issue. The concrete achievement of this was in 2014 of the Subcommission on Gender, hereafter the Gender Commission. Establishing such a formalized mechanism to include the gender perspective in peace negotiation was unprecedented. The Gender Commission invited several delegations of women, and they include or try to include diverse views, political affiliation, and ethnic compositions, not only from Bogota and provincial capitals, but also from rural areas. And the direct participation of both women and victims in the negotiation table had an important impact. Firstly, they share testimonies on experience of how the armed conflict affect their lives. Secondly, the women brought concrete proposals regarding various agenda items. Thirdly, and no less important, that the representatives meet not only the gender commissions, but were also welcomed by the leaders and the large part of the negotiation party delegations. And this was really important because the head of the delegation made a commitment to integrate the gender approach to the peace talks, for which they could be held accountable. The process approach at the end in 2016, a group of former female combatants from other peace processes were invited to Havana. And these female former combatants that was from Indonesia, Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, Northern Ireland, South Africa, and Uruguay participated. Many of women emphasize that opportunities that a peace agreement represents, as well as the fact that the fight for women's rights continue at full strength in male-dominated societies. and as well as internally in their own organizations. So the Gender Commission received valuable recommendations on how intervention programs should be designed to better respond to the needs of the mobilized women. As a result, 2016, the final agreement, the final peace agreement contains over almost 130 strong gender provisions recognizing the unique experience of women during the armed conflict. Now, peace agreements implementation. The subgender of the Gender Commission during the peace talk later was included in the Commission for Monitoring and Verification of the Peace Agreement. And this is a kind of consultative body responsible for following up the fulfillment of the agreement. And although it was an unprecedented process, it doesn't mean that its implementation is free of obstacles. I do consider that the greatest challenge is now up to the women to the reintegration pathway, because for Arianas, they have to choose the shift that this kind of from masculinization during the war times to feminization during the post-conflict scenario. And what is most important is what it means to be a woman in Colombia and what it means to be a former guerrilla in Colombia. So experience from other contexts, including Salvador and Guatemala, shows that women in guerrilla groups experience relative equality with men in the field, but were expected to return in traditional gender roles after the peace agreement came into force. And this is a kind of setbacks or drawbacks that, for example, due to the war, the skill will be limited and the market will be unable to absorb them. They have to suffer the stigmatization that are violent. And often, women often have limited economic possibilities, limited rights, and limited access to produce resources as credit, land, housing, training, employment opportunities, and technology. And what is more, they have acquired different skills during the conflict that are not certified, and of course they don't fit in the traditional and proper work for them. And this is I'm working on it. I'm not gonna explain, but there are some. I'm just dividing the roles in driving forces and restraining factors to push their development and their human development and their rights. Some of them, the driving forces, sexual and reproductive rights, political participation, education, and restraining factors are unpaid and domestic care work, and I call it las nuevas armas de casa, and gender-based violence and discrimination. Conclusions. DDR alone cannot provide security and development to a post-conflict country, but must be a part of the broader political, economic, and social national reconstruction strategy. The establishment of subcommission on gender was part of the formal peace architecture has turned out to be an effective instrument to gender inclusion in the peace process. And what made it possible to do, what made it possible to apply in the Colombia context? First, women, voice, and presence in position of political power was very important for introducing gender issues. But as everybody knows, that women in parliament do not necessarily serve as voices for women as a group in society. And second, I think that this was the crucial thing, or the essential part was the women in civil society organization for produce democratizing agendas and achieving policy change that benefits women as a group. And when women, as we can say in the Colombian experience, when women participate widely in policy design, when they assume power, or when we assume power and speak loud, when we articulate our efforts, we also include the demands of other vulnerable groups like LGBTI community, organization with a plurality of political affiliation, ethnic or Afro-descendant group. And when women engage in, community level activities, we shape new models of social organization, and we prepare communities to accept new ideas. So there are several positive impact when ensuring the full, equal, and meaningful participation on women on peace process. And okay, so thank you. I think that I have enough time.
Yes, you're perfectly on time. So
Okay.
thank you very much, Isabel. Thank you. So now, Cass will take your presentation.
Thank you, Zainab. Let me see if that works. That was really 12 minutes, huh? Isabel, I hope I do the same. Let me see. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so also about Colombia, so really nice to have Isabel here and share that country together. I'm also going to talk about peace building from below. Just to say, this research was coordinated by Santiago Mera, who is from Justicia and Paz, Justicia y Paz, which is an organization in Colombia, but we agreed that I would present because Santiago unfortunately doesn't speak English. So I was also with him together with this in this research, and we agreed that I would do that. So this research has been done in collaboration with the Open University Christian Aid, which is an international NGO based in London. That's where I worked before joining Open University, and Santi Mera from Justicia y Paz, which is the national organization in Colombia. It's an organization that has been working for peace for many years. The overview of the area, we are in a state, Valle de Cauca, which is one of the most difficult ones in terms of conflict in the area, because we were working there with Afro-Colombian and indigenous Hunan communities. And they have experienced decades of violence and insecurity for different reasons. Number one, because Valle de Cauca has a long river. There is a harbor there that is very important, the harbor of Buenaventura. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of trafficking, formal and informal, of weapons and drugs. On top of that, there's also corporate mining companies that have also interests in the region. So it makes things much more complicated even. And to put things even worse, there was the COVID-19 pandemic. And we realized while we were studying there that it created not only a double, but even a triple lockdown in terms of, number one, conflict, because people are already on lockdown when they are living in conflict areas, health issues because of COVID, and number three, climate, because it was the dry season and they couldn't go for their food. The question that we were asking was, how have Afro-Colombian and indigenous communities in Valle de Cauca, especially in those areas, Naya and Bajo San Juan rivers, built peace in the context of peace accords? So it was how they have been affected and at the same time, how they have influenced. And we looked at that from three different perspectives: territory and environment, democracy and participation, and memory and justice. And we also looked at the role of NGOs, the changing role. Now that the peace agreement has been signed in 2016, how did the role of NGOs, international NGOs and national ones, change, if it changed at all, as we will see later? The method, we collected data. This is a long-term study, so we are 5 years on, since 2017 up until now. Justicia and Paz, the national organization where Santi works, made regular research visits to communities. I also visited as part of Christian Aid, and also female, male and youth leaders from the communities collaborated in the research. One of the challenges we had was that they did collaborate, so we made it a collaborative, but people changed in the communities because of the situation. So we agreed that as long as the socio-demographic profiles are the same, as long as there are youth, we don't mind whether the youth changes, if that makes sense. But we wanted at least to keep the profiles to try to be systematic. But that's a challenge that I think all of us find when we work in conflict areas. It's or post-conflict areas. People migrate, people change, etc. And then collection methods, we needed them to be as flexible as possible because of the situation and the context. So we included interviews, workshops. We recorded 10 video clips and WhatsApp messages, especially during COVID-19. And then community people also recorded their own videos and observation. So the first finding is that we wanted to see also when the national and the local get together, right? So it's important, and as Isabel was saying in her presentation, when national processes happen or international processes happen, how the voices of those living the conflict are represented there, right? At the same time, we think that in daily life, it's important to find that mid space between the local and the national, and that's what we were also exploring there. So peace building strategies at local level by citizens in Valle del Cauca have been many. That's the first finding. And that wouldn't probably surprise anyone, but we were surprised that they were even more than what we expected. They have created humanitarian zones for protection of their areas against armed people from all sides, maintained cultural, sport and symbolic activities for peace, created local associations for the promotion of human rights and for the eradication of illicit crops. And these associations are quite relatively new compared to other ones, the illicit crop ones. They requested a national ceasefire and state guardianship during COVID-19 and created initiatives to develop the region economically. For instance, the creation of cooperatives and a bottom-up economy rather than international and even national corporations coming to extract resources, right? So they want to do their own economy. The second finding is, despite these economies being there, they don't overlap with national initiatives such as the Peace Accord or other regional and national peace instruments. So we're talking, for instance, about the current government. We can see that there are still forced displacements, despite the Peace Accord having been signed. There are still forced displacements. There are still returns that are unsafe once populations have been displaced. Then programs of rural development and of voluntary substitution of illicit crops, which are part of the peace agreement. They have not reached at least this area, so it's still early to say in Valle de Cauca because that hasn't reached the area yet. It's still a pilot process despite being 5 years on. I mean, it's evolving now. And they haven't included the social development initiatives coming from the local. So that's an area that it's important to connect. And while communities are going through their painful ceremonies, there are still killings, especially of people who are dealing with finding alternatives to illicit crops. And also women's groups such as COCAM, the illicit crops associations, alternatives to illicit crops, and DAINI, which is a local women's association. Also for the role of NGOs, the third finding is that as NGOs, we are a bit on a crossroad. Why? Because we are trying to make that transition from protection to developing social development and trying to move towards a post-conflict situation. But that's proving hard. Why? Because people are still dying and being killed. So we are sort of stuck in maintaining that protection role while trying to move to, for instance, developing social development programs that have to do with illicit crops or economic development in the areas. It's also difficult in terms of communities because some of them are not used to project management. That's another challenge we are finding in that transition. And also another challenge is how to create new relationships with the ex-FARC, especially, right? They are now a political actor, an official one. So how do we deal with that without our names as civil society being affected, right, negatively in that sense? Also, we are worried that the international humanitarian law could stop applying in a context that nonetheless still remains violent. So that's a worry also for international organizations. Just to conclude here, the last two slides, our main conclusion is local peace building initiatives and the Peace Accord have worked on parallel paths, at least for Valle de Cauca, in the area where we have studied, yet the opportunities exist to make these links. So the local peace building initiatives need to be integrated in the national plans of development as they are happening. of the accord if peace is to be democratic and sustainable. Investing in the overlaps within that local national hybrid space, as McGuinty would name it, is likely to be the best strategic way to support long-lasting peace. That is where national and local initiatives meet. And there, just for you to see my last slide. As you can see, responding to the sub-questions that we had, we've given some examples as implications for practice and action there also. For instance, in territory and environment, you have include the economic, environmental, and social initiatives from the communities in the PEDETs, which are the rural development programs that the Peace Accord is suggesting and is implementing. So let's include those local initiatives that already exist there at the moment, right? Rather than those coming on paper or from the government. So they need to talk to each other. And also implement the substitution plans for easy crops in collaboration with coca-related local associations such as COCAM. Don't let them out of the game. They are key in that. Then in terms of democracy and participation, develop the community's administrative autonomy as per the accord. That's something that indigenous people and Afro-Colombians really demand. They want their autonomy. They want to generate, thanks enough, I'm 1 minute left, yeah, 30 seconds. They really want to develop their own regions, and that has to be part of the accord as well, that autonomy. Promote regional and local associationism, and then for memory and justice, ensure that the local initiatives that have to do with reconciliation are also acknowledged and included as part of the peace accord. That will be it from me, Zainab. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Ka.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So the floor is now over to you, Michael and his team from Nigeria. Maybe can stop sharing.
How do I do this? Just a second.
Okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, can you hear me better this way? All right. So welcome to our presentation. This is titled Women Groups and Combating Farmer-Herder Conflicts in Nigeria. It is written by Michael Ogu, Uzibi, Irmia, which is myself, and Franca, and I'll be presenting this paper. In the course of this presentation of farmer-herder conflicts in Nigeria, we're going to historicize women groups' involvement in the conflicts. And can you still hear me? I'm sorry, it seems my network is misbehaving. All right, thank you. And then we'll go through the challenges that women-driven conflict resolution strategies face in Nigeria, and then we'll try to foster solutions to advance women's actions against the farmer-herder conflict in Nigeria. Now, as a background, the farmer-herder conflicts in Nigeria are a result of several factors, which Chilua have been able to encapsulate perfectly, noting that it is a result of pressures on land because of expansion of commercially cultivated areas, corporate mining, pastoral rangelands, and all of these have been exacerbated by climate change. And so we have a situation in Nigeria where, several factors ranging from bad economic policies to the increasing human population in Africa and consequently Nigeria, land degradation, political dishonesty have all come together to create the cacophony of, of a plethora of problems that have resulted in the farmer-herder conflicts. But a very important context in Nigeria are the ethnic and religious differences. So on the one side, on the farmer side, we have the predominantly Christian minority groups, and on the herders, we have the predominantly Muslim majority group. And so this dynamic has shaped the trajectory of the farmer-herder conflict, and it has also influenced women, how women are affected and how women participate in these conflicts. Now, while this has affected nearly every state in Nigeria, there are 14 states that have been the most influenced, and of these 14, 10 are from northern Nigeria. And this is important to put in context when we discuss women's participation, because women in northern Nigeria face different contextual issues than women from southern Nigeria. And so we'll see that when we discuss the challenges of implementing women-driven solutions to the conflict. So how then, what role have women played in the farmer-herder conflicts in Nigeria? It's important to note that women constitute 49% of the 195 million population in Nigeria. And of that 49%, of the 100% rather, 70 are agriculturalists or farmers. And of these, we have 60 being women who participate on different levels, both subsistence and commercial farmers. And even in the herder communities, we have women who own cattle to different extents. And so we have a map of the roles that women have played in this conflict. Women are not simply victims of the conflict. As Isabel has noted in her presentation prior to mine, it's easy to relegate women in conflict to just being victims. But women have played different roles. Women have served as household heads in the absence of men. Women have also been combatants, either on the defending or on the offending side. They have served as informants. They have participated in the formal peace processes, and they have been at the forefront of the national non-governmental organizations, rather, that have provided legal or humanitarian aid to the conflict areas. And so this presentation is a proposal really of more ways that women can be integrated into the peace process in the resolution of the farmer-herder conflict. Now, the proposal is subsumed under the socialist feminist theory. The socialist feminist theory doesn't simply focus on patriarchy, but focuses on the influence of capitalism on patriarchy and how it fosters economic dependence and statistical discrimination. Now, socialist feminism is also known for its proposal or its upholding of women welfare groups as a solution to the capitalist patriarchy that has been perpetrated. And so women's welfare groups have come to be a hallmark of women's influence in society, women's influence in communities. And so we're tapping into this theory to propose women-driven solutions. So why women really? What is the rationale for proposing women-driven conflict resolution strategies? The first is the need to deconstruct the victim status of women. As I've said previously, it is easy when we hear of a conflict situation and the general representation of women to simply think of them as victims of sexual violence or simply victims of the conflict. But women are strong and formidable and able to contribute immensely in conflict resolution strategies. The second is the power of grassroots activism. For most women, especially in northern Nigeria, they are at the lowest cadre of the society, and so they have information about the lowest or at the grassroots level. You know, they form the churches, they form the mosques, they are the market women, they know things even before they happen. And so by involving women, you will be able to foster a bottom-up approach to conflict resolution rather than a top-bottom. The third is a holistic and robust strategy. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then being able to forge coalitions between government and the grassroots level. Now, women in Nigeria have had a long history of being involved in conflict resolution, both colonially and post-colonially. Colonially, the most significant example we have is the Aba Women's Riot, where thousands of women congregated from different societies to protest the imposition of warrant chiefs and the imposition of taxes and the exclusion of women from politics. Feminist coalition who championed the NSAS protests, providing legal and financial.
We can't hear you. There's a problem with the network.
And guidance, and
can you hold on a bit?
What
please?
then are the challenges? How about now?
I think now we can
hear me now.
Yes, can we try switching off our cameras just so that maybe it will help? It will help her.
Okay.
Okay.
Where did you stop hearing me from? Sorry.
Perhaps you
Oh, let
take
me
this.
just go ahead.
The previous slide.
Yes.
Let me just go ahead so that I'll save time. So challenges to
Let's switch off our
women-driven
cameras,
conflict.
please. Our cameras, all of us.
Okay. Thank you. Challenges to women-driven conflict resolution strategies. Now, having agreed that involving women in conflict resolution strategies would provide a more holistic and bottom-up grassroots approach to conflict resolution, what are some of the challenges that face women, especially in this context in northern Nigeria, from participating in conflict resolution? The first is the exclusion of women from decision-making processes. Now, especially, like I said earlier, especially in northern Nigeria, culture and religion serve or pose a very serious threat to participation of women in politics or in decision making, both at the community and the state level. So we often have women not being involved, or as Lucetti notes, only female celebrities or a few isolated female officials are involved in the conflict resolution process. And then they leave the local women who are directly involved in the policy in the processes with the hard work of implementing these peace programs. And so we have solutions that have no input from local women being imposed on them to to implement, and this creates a problem in implementing. So the second we have is the non-recognition of women's changing roles. Like I've said severally, really, because people fail to recognize that women are able to take up different roles in society, not just being victims of these conflicts. They have not been involved, and their solutions have not been implemented in the way that they should. Now, what particular steps can be taken to advance women's actions against the farmer herder crisis in Nigeria? The first is early warning and prevention. Like I've said earlier, women are involved at the grassroots level of conflicts, and they often know even before an attack happens or even before a certain event occurs that it is going to occur, because they have this information because of their level. So by involving grassroots women, they can serve as informants or be an early warning or prevention mechanism so that the government can take preemptive measures to prevent more conflicts from happening. The second is the organization and participation in campaigns and advocacies. Now, campaigns and advocacies by churches or mosques rather, or other social institutions can be championed by women because they are able to reach people on a level that the government cannot, because they are present in that society, they are part of the society, and they are the society, and they can also foster interfaith and interethnic dialogue. Because the unique context of the farmer herder conflicts in Nigeria involves, they have serious religious and cultural undertones. It is important to develop interfaith and interethnic linkages to prevent or to begin to understand the core background problems between within this causing the conflict. And so we have women who are market women who sell things right beside each other, and of different ethnicities and of different faiths. If this is tapped into by the government to help them to have a better understanding of the underlying problems resulting in the conflict. Now, finally, in the three P's of conflict resolution: peacekeeping, peacemaking, and peace building, women have shown that they are capable and have the potential to influence very greatly these processes. But it's important that their contributions are acknowledged and implemented. Their opinions should be sought by government. Women groups who are advocating for peace in the farmer herder conflicts need to be heard, need to be listened to, and their suggestions should be implemented in order to provide a holistic bottom-up approach to conflict resolution. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. I hope I'm getting your name right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me try to stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you. Once she stops sharing, then we'll take Gordon and James. which will be the final presentation, and then we'll open up for questions and answers.
Okay, I don't know how to stop sharing this.
Go back to the share screen, the green one. Okay, yeah, it's done now.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, is that visible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I will start the presentation and then hand over to James. Zainab, please don't let me speak for more than 5 minutes maximum. Okay, this paper, it results from research which is undertaken in early 2020 in Cameroon. There's a fuller version in a downloadable report, and I'll provide the link in the chat at the end. The focus is on the role of civil society organizations in conflict resolution in Cameroon in the context of shrinking civic space. Let me start with some background information on the current conflict in Cameroon. So Cameroon's so-called Anglophone conflict has been an armed conflict ongoing since September 2017 between state security forces and armed separatist groups who are fighting for an independent Republic of Ambazonia in the country's two English-speaking northwest and southwest regions, which you can see highlighted there on the map. This is very much a neglected civil war. It was categorized by the Norwegian Refugee Council as the world's most neglected displacement crisis for 2 years running, 2019 and 2020. There are almost daily atrocities that are ongoing. The figures are, because of the hidden nature of the conflict, the figures are of numbers killed and villages burnt and numbers displaced. These are old figures. They're figures mainly that go back to 2018. But because of the hidden nature of the conflict, the lack of official figures, we can say at least that these are an underestimate. Also, the degree of gender-based violence and rape involved in the conflict is quite shocking. Atrocities are certainly committed by both sides, but an important point is that those by the armed separatist groups are fewer and not equivalent to those of the state forces, as stated by Willis et al. In their report in 2020. Let me just talk very briefly about the colonial roots of the conflict. Now, of course, Cameroon originally was a German colony, and then in 1919 there was partition after the First World War into British and French mandates. So two separate polities with distinct political administrations were created under first the League of Nations and then under the UN mandate. It was an unequal partition with 1/5 to the British and 4/5 to the French. And you can see that that's the colonial developments in the various maps there. But let me turn to the post-independence period. So reunification occurred at independence in October 1961, when the British administered southern Cameroons joined the former French Cameroon. But post-independence, there were a series of major political changes by the first and second presidents that abolished the federal system that had been created in October 1961, it was reunification and independence. So the federal system was abolished, and in general there were policies to assimilate Anglophone Cameroon into Francophone Cameroon. And this led to sort of deepening malaise, feelings of marginalization and increasing French influence, erosion of the Anglo-Saxon heritage in terms of language, culture, values, and also the Anglophone systems in the political systems, in education and the legal system. So there was the so-called Anglophone problem in Cameroon was a result of this. These feelings of marginalization increased, and the current crisis commenced in October 2016 with peaceful protests which were initiated by lawyers and teachers. And here you can see the peaceful protests by lawyers dressed in their gowns and their wigs. And these peaceful protests were led by what was dubbed lawyers in wigs and teachers in suits to sort of protect the Anglophone legal and education systems against Francophone assimilation. But the government responded with violence and the repression of these peaceful protests. And this in turn gave impetus to the separatist voice. It led to separatist views taking center stage and to the formation of armed separatist groups. And the armed conflict occurred commenced in September 2017 and resulted in sort of military occupation of the Anglophone regions and the declaration of war against the separatists by the president. So the civil war that ensued has continued to the present day, with rural civilians particularly affected and brutalized, as much of the conflict takes place in the rural areas. Now, conflict resolution is most commonly top-down, undertaken by governments and international organizations. There have been some attempts, but unsuccessful, and the sincerity of the government has been doubted. So we asked the question, what can a bottom-up approach to peace building offer? And as we know, the scholarly literature on conflict resolution has recently placed more emphasis on bottom-up or grassroots approaches to peace building. Yet it's also recognized that such attempts are not a panacea, nor without their complexities. And this is particularly so in a conflict situation such as that of Cameroon, where the space for civic action by civil society organizations is significantly restricted by the government. And of course, this relates to another recent strand in the academic literature concerning shrinking civic space. So this research investigates this seemingly sort of paradoxical situation where on the one hand there can be high expectations of the role of civil society organizations, yet the scope for their action is limited. So we asked these three research questions. In what ways have Cameroonian CSOs engaged in conflict resolution efforts? To what extent have such efforts been constrained by shrinking civic space? And by what means have CSOs sought to overcome such constraints? Let me hand over to you, James. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon. So to answer these questions, we organized a consultative dialogue workshop in Douala on the 29th of January 2020 with 15 Cameroonian civil society organizations, which included women's organizations, youth-led associations, and human rights groups, teachers association, and humanitarian and development organizations. The different CSOs were encouraged to engage in mutually beneficial discussion and reflection, with all sessions facilitated by a non-governmental organization. Follow-up semi-structured interviews were conducted in May 2020 with senior representatives of 6 civil society organizations. So most of all of the field data was collected by actually having these events, interviews, and the focus group or workshop with the CSOs that are actively engaged in the areas affected by the conflict. So with all this, we found that there have been some contributions made by civil society organizations to conflict resolution, and notably they have been able to provide humanitarian relief. They've organized peace campaigns. They've been involved in documenting human rights violations, healing those that have been traumatized by the conflict events. And then they have also been involved in peace and human rights education. However, we did note that these civil society organizations have avoided advocacy of political solutions, like, for instance, in the context of this particular conflict, raising the issue of federalism, which was introduced in 1961. And the reason why this is so is because the CSOs feared that if they raise political issues around political solutions to the conflict, it would attract repression from the state. Now, if we look at peace campaigns, for instance, that we organized, we noted that these were mainly organized by women's organizations. And here, for instance, we saw women asking for a return to schools, to an end to the destruction of health facilities, killing, and calling for dialogue and a ceasefire, among others, in a bid to end the conflict. So these efforts that women groups particularly have been making, or CSOs have been making, have been taking place, as Gordon has said, within a context where civic space is shrinking. And so what exactly has this shrinking space been, and what are the challenges that the CSOs within this context have faced? We noted that there have been administrative restrictions and control. And so, for instance, the CSOs have seen their access and movement in conflict zones restricted, which makes it actually difficult for them to engage with people who need help, given that they see humanitarian assistance as one of those activities that are necessary in the process to actually build and sustainably end the conflict. We've also seen that they have been the subject of surveillance by the military. We also noted that the CSOs face intimidation and violence. They are sometimes accused of being terrorist sympathizers by the military, and on the other hand, being state collaborators by separatists. So whatever they do, it seems they're caught in between, and they would always be attacked, making their work really difficult. attacks on the CSO properties were also documented. And we also noted that there were threats to their life, and there were some were kidnapped. The other challenge that we noted was that there is sector discord. This one, which is a challenge from within, as I can say, and some CSOs we saw thought they should dance to the tune of the government, and then we also saw that others were more competing with their counterparts rather than collaborating or acting in solidarity. So you try to make sure that they don't succeed with what they are doing, although yourself you're actually embarked on the same initiative. Quite ironical. Now, in spite of these different challenges and the problems posed by shrinking civic space, the CSOs have, however, been able to put in place strategies to counter the problem of shrinking space. The first one is public education and awareness of their role. And second, they have embarked on accurately documenting and ensuring that they have data of good quality. The reason is with this, it becomes easy for them to actually ward off the kind of criticisms that may come from one party, the government or the separatists. The CSO mobilization. Yes, CSO mobilization, networking and coalition building has also been one of the strategies. We've also had dialogue and communication, which has been one of their strategies to counter the challenges faced. In conclusion, I would say that the study confirms the significance of civil society's role, or the role of civil societies to engage with most affected communities and build an evidence base of the conflict's adverse consequences for citizens, to draw national and international attention to conflict, and also to maintain pressure for peace negotiations. Limitations due to shrinking civic space, however, abound. Freedom of expression is curtailed with discussion on the form of the state, for instance, effectively prohibited. CSOs have been subject to state surveillance, delegitimization through intimidation and accusations of bias. And we have, however, seen that they've responded by building coalitions, and that they've actually had organized peaceful protests to reassert freedoms of assembly and expression, and that they've created spaces to interact with most affected communities. They've claimed spaces for dialogue with combatants, and also we've seen that there's been examples of resistance and adaptation from the different CSOs. So as final thoughts, I would say that the role of civil society organizations is important and indispensable, but the context within which they operate in Cameroon is difficult, and the challenge is profound. Local civil society organizations have therefore had to tread very carefully and skillfully as mediators in bottom-up processes that enhance local agency efforts towards conflict resolution. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Sorry, because of time, I had to stop you. So thank you to all the presenters. And I won't really take a lot of time, but I'll quickly say my comments and ask a few questions to kick off the question and answer session. So thank you, Bomai, for your interesting presentation on the role of the Yuri women in peace building. And I must say, I was really impressed when you used visuals to show some of the paths that you've taken, which is something I also use in my own research. So it's that was really good. So my question is, how easy was it for you to gain access to these participants? I also see the agency of women, like you highlighted, in advocating for an end to, the issue of sorcery associated with violence that affects women. So this is interesting. I would like you to please tell us how you were able to, gain access to some of these participants, even though I know you're an insider, but this information will be important. For Isabel, thank you very much. You do stress the importance of women to peace agreements. You highlight the importance of their voices, the marginalized voices. And sometimes when you were talking, I was like, okay, she was, this is Zainab also speaking. Some of what you said were similar to my own findings. Here again, I see the agency of women. I would like you to please provide some more information on your experience in the fieldwork with the combatant women, some of your engagements with them, because clearly these are groups that are maybe stigmatized by the community, by the society. So I would like you to please give us more information. Cass, very interesting in terms of also on Colombia, you highlighted decades of violence and insecurity affecting women. I would like you to say more about the corporate mining companies that have interest in the region, because I know, like, similar to what happens in oil producing countries, there are a lot of issues that are related to some of these mining multinational companies that affect women. So that is also interesting. I would like to know more about that. And also, why are the initiatives not finding connections within the micro, meso, and the macro level? So what is the problem? Is it that it's more top down as against the bottom up that you're talking about? Then for Michael and his team, Uzibi, thank you very much. You spoke very well. Being Nigerian and also a woman from the northern part of Nigeria, one thing I would like to highlight is there is a recognition of the changing roles of women, but rather I think the focus is on the non-acceptance of these changing roles of women in northern Nigeria. And I think the issue of relegation of women to the background is not only specific to northern Nigeria, it cuts across Nigeria as a whole. I've seen that in the Niger Delta and other regions that I have worked with. I like it that you highlight the issue of the psychosocial aspects of this conflict, which is still one area that is yet to be explored. But what I missed out from your presentation is the methodology. I would like to know what the types of methodology you use in your study, and most importantly, the groups you work with in getting, the data for your project, like the different women groups you interviewed in northern Nigeria. Then for Gordon and James, very interesting. I would like you to give, more elaboration in terms of the consultative dialogue, especially with the women groups that you mentioned. And also, since the civic space is shrinking, towards the end, you spoke about, some of the initiatives some of these women groups are taking, but I would like if you could elaborate more in terms of how some of these, especially the women groups, are able to navigate the barriers that exist. Thank you very much. And while they're answering, please feel free to raise up your hand or send the question through the chat box. Over to you. So Bomai, will you start?
Zainab, thank you. Okay, how do I get access to the woman in the Yuri tribe, if I am correctly rephrasing your question? Okay, Yuri people have been living in their tribal territories for many years, and at the time I went to do my interview, one of the things I did was to identify women who were living in the tribal area for more than 3 years. Because many women now moved to other places with their family because of local circumstances. And although I am from the Yuri tribe, it is made up of 13 clans, and I am from one clan. So it is difficult to understand and really get to know what women were doing in the village. In 2013, that's when the 13 clans got together to for peace building and reconciliation to address tribal fights and intra-clan fights, which destabilizes the tribal and clan system, and also the family and other social services. So I was part of that group to actually work with my tribal community to build peace, and I work in another province, but I would go back to the village frequently during weekends to work with these people. And then through the peace building and reconciliation process, more and more women were coming out to talk about to their own experiences and share, and what they what they think an ideal peaceful community, a secured safe community should look like. And it was them talking about all these things. So what I had to do was to learn, listen, and learn from them. And in 2018, when I returned for my fieldwork, the peace and reconciliation process already consolidated. That 13 clans were united, and they were not talking about tribal fights and other forms of violence. And when I walked into the different villages, they began to accept and welcome me, not only as a person, as a local person, but also the women began to appreciate that I was there to investigate that particular violence and how they stepped forward to address it. And from the interviews and from storytelling and photo voice, the woman really appreciated that now I was doing that investigation, but also mindful, because socially accusation-related violence is a sensitive issue, and not many women would come forward to provide information. They have to ask their tribal leaders, their husbands, and other people around them. And we also have to deal with what kind of information that they provide, so that none of the participants are put at risk after the interview and data collection process. So we have to think through all of this. And also during the interview and storytelling and photo voice process, what I like about it is a reflective process where the participants not just came out to tell their story, but they thought about it in a very deep way, so that they can clearly understand the complexity of the problem, as well as decide the kind of information that they wanted to provide. And I was there facilitating, listening, and I think it was a collaborative process that they reflected. I also reflected during the nights, and I think, and in that process, we also build trust and mutual understanding, and we genuinely understand that we
Sorry, because
were,
of time, I have to stop you so that the others can also answer. We just have
yeah,
about 15 minutes or less. Thank
a
you.
group of people coming together to address sorcery accusation related violence, which I think is another extension of now ongoing peace building initiative in the community.
Thank you. Isabel?
Well, I think that my experience working with them, it's confusing because it's not easy just to be aware that they experiences during the war times and they assume some masculinized role. But once they lay down their weapons, they want to reveal a new life, and it's based on the traditional feminist or women roles, and they want to have children, they want to be a mother, they want to have a job and have a traditional opportunities. But it's the paradox relation the communities is because communities could be distrustful towards female combatants, and at the same moment they feel themselves that they don't fit in the traditional expectations. And that's why FARC, they create a theory like insurgent feminism, and it is a struggle that involves collective liberation, and it is based on an idea that the necessity of wealth redistribution and playing with the broader class struggle. And they pretend that the transformation occurs in the redistribution of wealth, and then the full recognition of women's rights and their historical roles. But Mujeres Farianas, that is this group, they intend to take up to the advances of the new revolutionary struggle, and they pretend the emancipation through the political participation, and that was the main idea of the political party that they create. So I think that this is the main challenge for them, that just not on the individual roles instead of the collective reintegration as a group, and with the all rights to the civil society. And one of the most important is the political issue, I think. So I think that this is the biggest challenge.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Zainab. Very, very short from me. So on corporate mining, you were asking, very interesting, because for the case of Colombia, and I think it'll be the case in other countries, then the official narrative has been, as long as we have peace with the main guerrilla, which is the FARC, everything will go fine, right? But there are many other narratives that build up peace as well, which is mining companies, if there's not a solution to extractive industry and dealing with that sustainably, and dealing with drugs as well, which is related to economic movement, there won't be peace. So that's another narrative that is also very important, on top of the government against the main guerrilla or other guerrilla groups, pre-guerrilla groups, and actual current guerrilla groups. And for your other question about linking national and local, why it hasn't happened, I think that's really interesting as well, because sometimes the peace accords get frozen in time, right? You sign a peace accord, in this case, 2016, and you implement it. It takes long to implement. By the time you implement the ideas of 2016, you're already in 2021 or 2022. So the point is, we can't do that implementation in a how can I say, a still way, right? It has to be a fluid way, a movement perspective to the peace accords, something that is fluid and that integrates things that are already happening during that time, the implementation, the post-agreement, and that includes the local. And I think, just to finish, the role of international NGOs, the role of national NGOs in that, in ensuring that the local initiatives and national initiatives, which will be top-down inevitably because they have their thing to do and they have to be broad in scope, that to ensure that NGOs can ensure that that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. So Michael and his team.
Okay, I'm going to answer or respond to the first question, then he would respond to the methodology question, and then I'll address the question right here in the comments. Thank you for pointing out the issue of non-acceptance rather than an absence of changing roles in a society. So it's like you said, really, these roles, or like I said in my presentation, even women have, the conflict has driven women to take different roles in the society or in the conflict. But these roles are either not accepted or not recognized, and so they don't reflect in policies, they don't reflect in peacekeeping processes. So I will make sure to make that adjustment in the paper to reflect the non-acceptance rather than an absence of changing roles. Sorry, Victor here asks how organizations that want to intervene in the conflict can support and recognize women in helping them to build peace in their communities. Now, one of the issues with NGOs or with humanitarian aid, as has been evidenced in a number of academic papers, is they come to communities with predetermined ideas of what communities need. But like we've said in the paper, there is a need for grassroots approaches, bottom-up approaches. So rather than coming to communities and simply deciding, okay, these people need this, you should talk to communities, talk to women, talk to grassroots associations. There are women societies in almost any community, either at the church level, the mosques, or even market women. These are grassroots organizations that these organizations should talk to get to know what exactly these societies need rather than deciding for themselves what they need. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll just do the methodology, and as Zainab asked, what method we used. Well, the research was largely from secondary sources, but the most of the feedback that we had, or that the reports we made on in terms of the roles that women play, are generated from my doctoral research. Of course, it's a while ago, but there have been a few follow-up on structured, focus group discussions, interviews with groups of farmers, groups of herders in some parts of the north, especially the areas where these conflicts are always reoccurring. I always make sure to have those kinds of informal conversations, of course, with the help of natives, because I'm not from the north myself, and I'm not fluent. I don't speak Hausa, So I use some indigenes who are very fluent, to have these informal conversations, and then we pick up some of the emerging trends, that there are in this conflict, and that's how these the sources or the data for this research was generated. But largely, we use secondary sources and, of course, reports from organizations like Search for Common Ground, International Crisis Group, and those kinds of organizations that have done sufficient studies in these areas to generate our data. Yeah, I think what we'll do is to plug that into the research so that it captures that.
Yes, it's important, because to make it stand out from what has been done on northern Nigeria, especially the farmer head fencing thing in northern Nigeria, you can talk to, Matan Zumunta is a Christian wing of, that almost in all the churches in northern Nigeria, they have Matan Zumunta, Women Association. There's the Federation of Muslim Women Association. There's also the Jam'iyar Matan Arewa and the others. We can link up later and I can give you some suggestions. Thank you. So over now to James and Gordon.
Thank you, Zainab. Gordon, I will take the question on how have women's groups navigated the barriers that exist, and now they have, like we said, been involved in advocacy. They have been trying to raise awareness as well, generally about their role, because they are misunderstood. And so they, in addition to advocacy, there is a general effort to create awareness about what they really want. And part of one of the ways they've done this is to organize this peace campaign. So they, in large groups, they've taken to the streets with placards and messages of peace to actually tell people, look, this is what we want. This is why we want this. And so some of the messages they carry on those placards have been sometimes about what they're going through as women, and of course what they want to see happen. So those are the main ways that they've actually been going about this. But there's some more subtle ways which have not been very open, which have been trying to really carry on with life as normal, right? Which doesn't really come out very, very clearly in the open like the other ones that I've mentioned. But many women have, for instance, tried to say, well, we're not, in some communities they've said, no, we're not going anywhere, would rather die here. And so they've by challenging the parties in that way, it's also had an impact. So it's made we might underestimate, but because we've not had the problem resolved, but what we do know is that this has had an impact. We see that the problem is perhaps really what else needs to be done in order for these efforts the women have made to translate into an effective and sustainable settlement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, perhaps I can just add, I think in some ways there's been a sequence in relation to how women's groups have navigated the challenges. And the first part of the sequence is mobilization and coalition building, sort of between organizations. So sort of gaining sort of an internal strength. And I think the Southwest Northwest Women's Task Force has been the prime example of that, where a large number of women's organizations have come together. And after that mobilization, then the advocacy takes place, and the public protests and demonstrations, always peaceful, and also that another way of navigating the challenges has been taking action at different levels. So right from the grassroots level with local women and girls, particularly sort of awareness raising and sort of rights training, engaging in dialogue in at the local level in the conflict zones with local communities, right up to sort of national level. So holding one protest march in Yaoundé, the capital, sort of trying to engage with the Prime Minister. So taking action at different levels, from the local to the national, and also creating new spaces in which to sort of undertake dialogue. So both creating and claiming spaces, public spaces in which to hold demonstrations. So a lot of sort of innovative methods have been involved in countering the challenges of shrinking civic space. But at the same time, being careful not to advocate, not to be seen to advocate a political solution. So not advocating a return to federalism, for example. So even though these very imaginative actions have taken place, they've also been within certain constraints and limitations of, which you could say are almost self-imposed, but because it's known what would happen, so they've been able to hold peaceful public demonstrations. But if banners were raised with federalism on them, rather than stop the violence, then that there would be it's more than likely that there would be a repressive response from the state.
Thank you, Gordon. There's one question for Bomai, if you could answer, actually 2 questions from Michael. Bomai, if you could answer quickly, what are the roles of state institutions to tackle SARB? And is there any kind of institutional mechanism to deal with these issues, at least finding out if they are false or true? Quickly, please, we're almost running out of time.
Yes, there are many state institutions such as the police and Papua New Guinea Law Reform Commission, and then the judiciary through the village courts, which is at the front line of addressing sorcery accusation related violence. So all the state institutions feel that SARB is everybody's business, and they're pulling resources in whatever way they can to support combating SARB. But again, there are challenges. For instance, if a perpetrator is brought to the criminal court of justice, then the court has its own process, such as bringing witnesses, and then they have to rely on evidence and so many other things. It also takes time. So many cases do not get through to the to a stage where perpetrators can be prosecuted. But while these challenges are there, yes, the state institutions are doing their best to support communities at different levels to address sorcery accusation related violence.
Thank you very much. So I think because of time, we've come to the end, and I would like to thank you all for your very interesting presentations. And I see, the agency of women being highlighted, over and over again, which is interesting. And I'll now hand over to my co-conveners, James and Gordon, to just say a few words, and then hopefully we can link up. I'm sure we have each other's email addresses on the DSA website, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. James?
Thank you, Zainab. It's been a very rich panel. I should say that I hope that we actually are able to get everybody's paper to ensure access. One of the things, for instance, that that came up from Cassie's paper was that we have women who become sort of rejected or suffer some prejudice as a result of the role they've played in conflict. So some of these issues are not really taken into consideration when peace accords are made as to how you're going to really make sure everybody settles down fine. And so it was a good mix of papers which bring out a good deal of things that I haven't seen in some of the literature. And so it would really be nice for us to actually have the papers available so that friends can read from each other's paper. And thank you to everybody who's asked questions and who's participated. It's been a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Yep. Great. Thanks very much. I just endorse all those comments. Also thank Zainab for chairing the panel so effectively, particularly when we had 5 presentations, keeping everyone to time. I think everyone was pretty self-disciplined, perhaps with the exception of myself and James, but that was good. I think it's been great having such a wide regional coverage, both yesterday and today. You know, from Latin America to Western Central Africa to Papua New Guinea. It's been very good, and to see some of the common themes that have emerged, particularly around the involvement of women's organisations in peace building. We did note that we were very pleased when this panel proposal was accepted, and we did note that there is no current study group within DSA on issues of peace and conflict. So that's something that we may want to think about as we go forward. So if you are interested in that and forming such a study group, then please get in touch, or alternatively, if we pursue it with the DSA, then we will also get in touch with you. So thanks to all for your participation. It's been great.
Thank you very much. So just like Gordon said, you have our email addresses. So if you're interested in being a part of the study group, let us know. And Isabel is also asking for recommendations in terms of publishing her paper. We can discuss more on this. So feel free to reach out, and we're here as a team, you know, we'll support each other and provide as much guidance as we can. Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure. Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.